Welcome everyone to our first presentation today. For those of you who missed my brief welcome session, I am Claire Natola. I am the Education Coordinator for the Vermont Cheese Council. So let me just start by reminding you of a couple of logistical points. Feel free to use the chat window to say hello, to introduce yourself, or to make any comments or observations during the presentations. And we would love it if you could use the chat window now just to let everyone know where you're from. Tell us who you are and where you're from, and we will see everybody just getting started with the chat window. Fantastic. But if you have questions for our presenters, please use the Q&A window instead to type those questions. We have Rachel Fritzschall back. Hi, Rachel. Rachel is monitoring the Q&A window for this presentation, so thank you, Rachel. So you just want to remember to put your questions for the presenters in the Q&A window and general chit-chat in the chat window. If you have any technical issues, please email info@vtcheese.com. That's info@vtcheese.com. And I've just pasted that into the chat window for everyone, and I'll remind folks of that throughout the day. And another reminder that we will be recording each session, and we will have those recordings available to watch next week here on the SCED platform. And we will send everyone an email when those recordings are all loaded, so you don't need to worry about looking for them until you hear from us that they are ready. So we will get those ready for you as soon as possible next week. All right, let's get started. Our first session is presented by a great team. Bruno Giboudeau is a practicing veterinary surgeon and researcher into the cheese-making aptitude of milk according to herd diet. He created the OBSOLIM method for direct dietary diagnosis by observation. And Edward de Beukelaer is also a veterinary surgeon. He has worked alongside Bruno in making the OBSOLIM microcurt test methodologies available to farmers. So don't forget to put your questions for Bruno and Edward in the chat window for Rachel to ask them. And now I will turn it over to Edward to start their presentation.
All right, that's the wrong thing. I pressed the wrong button. Try again. Tips, share, and that should be fine now. Oops. I think you can see this now. Is that okay? So thanks for the introduction. So today we're going to speak about from the rumen to cheese. And I'm going to do the rumen bit. I'm going to introduce a few concepts which have to do with OBSOLIM, because Bruno, who will then make the link between the rumen and the eating and the cheese, will use some of these concepts so you can understand what he's doing. So, and the theme obviously is about how to keep the rumen of your animals happy. So a quick thing on the rumen, everybody knows this, but it's really important to keep repeating this, is that obviously a healthy rumen is a stable and efficient rumen, and when the rumen is healthy, the ruminant is healthy, and the food will be efficiently transformed, so you are economically interesting, and you have a reliable cheese production when that happens. And so what you need for this stable, efficient, healthy rumen is that you need to feed this microorganisms. Everybody knows that, but it's always good to remember this. You need the correct amount of energy, protein, and fiber. There's a lot of good knowledge about this. Ration making is coming leaps and bounds. But the other thing you need also is that this happens at the right time, that this energy, protein, and fiber is available, and that adequate periods of rumination in between the times when the animals eat. Because the rumen really needs regularity to maintain its efficiency, to make sure that these microorganisms are happy and don't get distracted by the abnormal things the animals be eating. So I have to say a word first on what's the natural rhythm of the rumen. And that's been shown in this diagram. So at the bottom of this diagram, you have the hour of the day. So at the left, we start with 0, and then we go to 3 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. So let's say the day starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. The cow should be eating for about 3 hours then. And then a little bit later, you see the little green block, that's a short time of rumination. A little bit later, they have to have a short meal again. And then in the afternoon, they really should lie down for 3 hours without interruption to ruminate, to make sure that the food they've eaten will turn into efficient food. And then by 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 12 hours has gone by, then the eating needs to start again, 3 hours, followed by a short period of rumination, the same schedule again, short period of eating, and then a long period of rumination. And then by then we're back in the morning at 6 o'clock. So 24 hours have gone by, and every 12 hours, the same situation needs to repeat itself. So we need this identical 12-hour cycle for the rumen to be happy to function in a normal way. And once you start to deviate from this 12-hour cycle, 1 or 2 hours is sort of acceptable, but more than 2 hours, problems will start. And Bruno will show that, particularly in the relation to the amount of food that's eating in the morning and in the afternoon. Once you start to deviate about 30% from that, your cheesability will seriously reduce. So the composition of this food and the amount eaten in the morning between, let's say, 6 and 9, and between 6 and 9 in the evening has to be more or less exactly the same for the rumen to be happy. And of course, in between, you have to milk, you have to move the animals to pasture, the animals have their social life and all the other things. And we have the farm constraints, which inevitably going to cause an interference in this normal natural rhythm. So we need to be able to recognize this interference and see how we can manage what I would call the rumen malaise, which can be a consequence of interference with this natural rhythm. So of course, the rumen is the most important body part of the ruminant, and anything that happens to the rumen will affect the whole animal. And this can be observed on the pads and the droppings. That's nothing new. Everybody knows that when the pads don't look right, we know something is wrong with the animals. But the interesting thing is that, and that's one of the beautiful things about Opsalim, is by observing the hairs, where the hairs stand up or form little crests, or where the skin is dry or greasy, or the eyes might have some black discharge or some yellow discharge, or the nose might be dripping or is dirty. With all these observations, and even to do with the behavior, we can link them to things that go wrong in the rumen. So, because the rumen obviously will affect the physiological processes, which then also can be seen in the urine, which might change in color, or the animals might become ill in a particular way, and more important, what the milk looks like, which is obviously important for cheesemakers. So when we're observing all the different symptoms on these different body parts which are related to the rumen, we need to know what it is, what we are seeing. And I think that's the interesting thing about Opsalim, which Bruno has realized, is that there are, for cattle, at least 188 signs and symptoms, which are really in a reliable, verified relationship to what's happening in the rumen. And how does this happen? So I've got an example here. So one of the more important signs you can see on animals, the animals might be sort of licking themselves behind the shoulder blades on their backs. And either you see them licking, or the hair is wet there, or the hair looks a bit rough. And Bruno has managed to relate each of these signs with a number of criterions, which you see on the bottom of this picture. You see the FE, GE, FP, and I'll explain them here on the left. So the fermented Fe means the fermentable energy. That's the energy available to the rumen, which means the energy available to the microorganism to transform the fodder you're feeding them, the grass, the hay, the maize you're giving them. So then the microorganisms in the rumen, they need energy, which is the criterion fermentable energy. And then you have the global energy. The global energy, that's the energy that becomes available to the animal. That's quite important, because that's the energy that will also go to the udder. If there's not enough global energy, there won't be enough energy to the udder, and then the protein production in the udder will may be disrupted, which will affect your cheeses. Then with the third criterion is the fermentable protein. That's the protein available again to the rumen, which means to the rumen microflora. That's the protein that's needed to digest again the grass and the hay and the maize. This fermentable protein can also be called the soluble protein. That's the protein that will dissolve in the rumen. And then again, you have the global protein available to the cow. And then the fifth criterion is the fermentable fiber, or the fine fibers, which is basically your grasses, your hay, and your, you present these in the analysis of the Opsalim signs. And then the structural fibers, which means the fibers which make the animals chew and eat slowly and makes them ruminate, provide saliva to keep a stable rumen. And then we come up the last criterion, which is the rumen stability, and that is the degree of fluctuation of pH in the rumen. So when you have a stable rumen, the microorganism that means the microorganism get regular approach supplies of energy and protein, regular supplies of food, and all that is nicely in balance, and they can work happily. The pH stays the same, and you have a really efficient rumen. When the rumen becomes unstable, microorganism will die off, your rumen becomes less effective, and things start going wrong. So these rumen-related symptoms that can be observed, they make a bit like a narrative. So if you can see something on the hair, something in the pads, and something on the nose, these like little words, and together they form a phrase. And I've produced sort of an example on the picture here. Let's say we were looking at the cattle and at the cows, and we found a lot of cows had hair standing up on the back of their back between the shoulder blades, so the hair standing up in the air, and we felt the skin, and the skin was greasy. We saw the pads in the parlor, the pads in the building, they were all changing, which means that you have more soluble pads, more liquid pads, more better formed pads. They all looked a bit different. And then by looking a bit closer, these pads, we noticed there's lots of short fibers. And then the nose of these cows, they kept a stain on them. They were a bit dirty. So these were the symptoms we sort of present in a lot of animals in this herd. And what we do is each of these symptoms have a score for the criterions at the bottom of them. And what we've done here, we just added up all for each criterion, we added up the scores for each symptom, and that will give us a score which is at the bottom of this table. So again, you see the fermentable energy, global energy, fermentable protein, etc., as I explained before earlier. So with this score at the bottom, 3, -1, 0, 0, 4, 0, and -4. So what does it say? We have a -4 for rumen stability, which means the rumen is unstable, pH goes up and down. There is going to be an inefficacy of the rumen. That's the first thing we know in this reading. The second thing we know, the fine fibers, more than the structural fibers, there's going to be food that's eaten up and that goes through the rumen, is not digested completely, comes out on the other side. So they're going to be wasted of food. You're going to lose money on the fodder you're giving to these animals. The other reading we can have is on the energy. There's quite a big gap between the 3 and the -1. That usually means that there's going to be loss on the amount of cheese you can produce from this milk. So there's going to be a loss of cheeseability, as we call it, because there's a lack of energy in comparison to the fine fibers. The animals don't have enough energy for the bacteria in the rumen to digest the fine fibers. You're going to have a loss of efficacy of this rumen. So that's the energy to rumen, and that's the energy to the animals. These animals are actually losing weight. So another example is this one, which comes out of the guide of Opsalim, and that's too quick. The really important reading is the -3 in this one. So -3 for the rumen stability. Again, you have an unstable rumen, which is probably worse than we think it is, because we have a +2 on the structural fibers. And an unstable rumen, what happens is that the energy for the other might not arrive in a steady way. It might go up and down, and that's going to affect the type of proteins, the quality of the proteins your cheese, the milk is going to contain, which obviously is going to affect the cheeseability. And this is another example. Again, we have a -2 rumen stability, but what stands really high is the energy, which is wasted, because we have a fermentable energy of 6, global energy of 2. The difference between these two usually means that the yield of your cheese will go down. And again, we have a high level from fine fiber in this reading as well. in this example, and that's going to be wasted again, which is going to upset the production of the protein in the milk. So once we have sort of made a score out of the cards we selected and the symptoms we saw, then we have to do the detective work. We have to ask questions: are the morning and evening meals exactly the same? Do the animals have equal access to the food? Can they sort of all eat together? Or are some animals worried they might not be able to eat enough at the right time? Are they left in peace to ruminate? That's really important. Don't upset your animals when they're ruminating, because that's when they're making money for you. That's when they're making good quality milk to make cheese. And do they eat what they are offered? They might be selecting, they might not eat everything and not eat, and that means that the meal in the morning and the meal in the night are actually different because they selectively feed it. And how good is the ration that is proposed? Maybe the ingredients are not exactly what we think they are. They're not actually producing the amount of energy and protein what we think they are producing. So this sort of approach, this obstinate approach, makes you able of knowing what's happening and make corrections before the cheese ability of the milk reduces or illness sets in. And what about the udder? That's of course the organ we really are interested in, because if your rumen is unstable, your udder will start to suffer because the energy there's not enough energy that arrives to the udder, or it might not arrive at the right time, or it might arrive in an irregular way. And that will influence the quantity of the milk that's produced and the quality of the milk, which is to do with the cheesability. Not complicated, everybody knows this, but what's important is that the symptoms related to milk represent only one organ. So when something goes wrong to your cheese, you don't necessarily know exactly what's going wrong in the rumen. There is a link, but to be able to make a reliable assessment of the rumen, you need a combination of at least signs of at least 3 body areas, because you need to have that phrase of several signs coming together to tell you exactly what's happening. So I'm just quickly going to point to a few symptoms that relate to the cheesability of the milk. So I mentioned that earlier in the example. You can see on the picture the hair standing up on the back between the shoulder blades. The cows are losing weight because there's not enough energy in the ration that's available to the cow, and they might show they might lose weight to try and keep the energy stable in the udder. But at other times, when this sign is available, you might not have enough. The yield of the milk, the cheese yield of the milk will actually go down when this symptom arises. The licking behind the shoulder blades indicates rumen instability. Inefficient rumen, the protein production in the milk is going to be unreliable because the arrival of the energy is going to be irregular. Viral burpats, again, quite often a sign of a rumen instability. The same for viral urine, which means that the urine, one cow might urinate yellow, the other one might urinate transparent, quite voluminous urine. And these signs are usually associated again with the rumen instability, inefficient rumen, and usually when these are visible on the animals, you get a reduced cheese production. And then an interesting sign is this vertical hair ridge on the shoulder. I don't know whether you can see that on the picture. You've got like a ridge of hair, which is a ridge that forms itself just behind the shoulder blades. And you see these coming up when the cows are eating. They're usually overeating. They'll be wasted as food. And again, that's when that happens, the quality of the milk will go down for your cheese production. And again, a note say that one sign of symptom does not tell the whole story. You really need a number of signs together to get a proper opsilim observation to know exactly what's happening, to know what you can change. But seeing one of the signs will explain already why there's something going to go wrong in your cheese production. So opsilim is about making these observations useful, and also about making these observations safe and making corrections safe, because you can make a correction and then quickly check, okay, these symptoms are changing, they improve, they don't improve, to know whether the correction you made actually was intelligent or not. So the information you get is not what's in your ration, but the information is about how the animals respond to what you're feeding them and their management. So that was a short introduction on opsilim. And on these criterions, Bruno will use in his presentation in a minute now. And so he will share some of the data he's collected to show the link between these rumen observations through Opsalim and the quality, the milk quality and the cheeseability. So thank you. It's over to Rumen now. I'll stop share. Bruno.
So we'll begin. So I will
Yes.
try to explain to you the link between the symptoms that they were talk about and the quality of the milk to make cheese. The microcheese method is like a basic cheese dairy that works alone without a cheesemaker. So we'll talk first about the link between food and cheese directly in link with the quality of the rumen. And there is another organ. This is the udder. The role of the udder is to make some to transform in the blood the amino acid and the small protein to protein coagulable in the milk. So the quality of milk is linked with the quality of the casein, the quality of the lactose, the quantity of the lactose, and the quantity of fat that is inside. So, and when you are making cheese, you are using the support of the casein, the coagulable casein, to extract something solid from the milk. And you know that the milk is changing, the quality of the milk is changing, because we have here an example of in a farm that we follow. With the Opsalim diagnosis, we had at one time a level of 4 with fermentable energy and a level of 3 with global energy. So to make cheese, we needed at that time 8 liters of milk to make 1 kilo of dry cheese. After a change of the meteorology, because we were in winter, the situation evolved to a level of 5 with fermentable energy and only a level of 1 point with the global energy. So in that case, we lose energy in the global part of the animal, so in the udder. So we need 11 liters of milk to make 1 kilo of dry cheese. So we lose 3 liters of milk to make the same quantity of cheese. So we go to the farm correcting the ration, and now we reach the diagnosis following in this number, a level of 0 about fermentable energy. So we have no access of fermentable energy, and the cows show to us a level of 2 for the global energy. And at that time, we reach the magnifique score that we need only 7.5 liters of milk to make 1 kilo of dry cheese. So the viability of the cheese, of the milk, the quality of the milk is in these three line, a maximum of 11 liters to make 1 kilo of cheese, or in better condition, we can reach only 8, we can need only 8 liters of milk to make 1 kilo of dry cheese, or in very, very good condition, 7.5 liters of milk to make 1 kilo cheese. So we'll see how does it work. In the udder, where is the blood go to milk, the urea go directly to urea in the milk, but the amino acids that are in the blood are transforming in amino acid, albumin, globulin, or casein. And this level of transformation depends on the level of energy available in the udder at all times between the 2 dairy times. So if we place the Opsalim animal indicators or the criterion, we have in link with the level of protein in the blood, the criteria fermentable protein. In link with the energy, we have the global energy. The stability of this global energy is in link with the rumen stability, and the flow of the rumen with decreasing energy or increasing energy is in link with the score of fine fermentable fibers or structural fibers. And then that goes to the adder to make some soluble protein that we can find them in the whey if we cook the whey. And we have coagulable protein from globulin to casein. And in this coagulable protein, we have non-retractable protein and retractable protein. And the cheese, in the micro cheese technique, we called it the curdle, is only made with retractable protein. So the gap between fermentable and global energy, this is the gap between theoretical milk and produced milk and produced real cheese. The Rumen stability indicates the regularity of transfer between blood and milk about the casein, and the global energy is in link with the energy density of the ration, and that level of energy density must be constant. That's what we'll see. So the micro cheese technique is very simple. We are using some tube, putting milk and rennet in this tube, and then we wait 24 hours in 38 degrees, very stable, and then we extract the curdle after observing the quality of this curdle. How to note the micro cheese morphology? So this is the curdle in the whey after 1 day of activity of rennet, and this is the curdle without the whey. So we can notice the torsion of the curdle with 4 levels of note, if it's broken or not, and the position, if it's at the top of the whey or stay in the bottom. And then we can assess the sharpness, very net or not, the trouble of the whey, and if there is some deposit at the top of the bottom, and if the cream is separate from the curdle. Another test is the dilution test. We had 30% of water, the second tube 50% of water, and the third tube 70% of water. This indicates the strength of the milk when you had some water or when you have an accident in the cheese factory. After that, we cooked the whey, and the whey is cooked at 85 degrees with some acid during 55 minutes, and this is the result. So the non-coagulable protein appears, and we have here 3 lines. A dark one, very low whey protein, a middle one that called fractionate protein, and the bottom, a very dense one. And this quality of protein are very heavy, and they are not so far from the casein. So we'll see further. We made an experimental study to test the regularity of feeding with the micro cheese. So I will show you this first result, and after we'll see another kind of result. So these are micro cheese extract from the tube. On the top, the first line, we have, this is in a farm where we are using green fodder. This was maize full plant. And we put 70% in the evening of this green maize, and in the morning we put 30% carryover to maintain the flow of bacteria in the rumen. So you see a little difference between morning and evening. The morning micro cheese are very thick, good torsion, and in the evening it's not so good because it's very lean, broken in some case. And the last line is a mix between the two milk. So when we use we give all the maize in one meal in the evening, the difference, the gap increase, because you have here the micro cheese of the morning, very curdled, very thick, very net, and the micro cheese of the evening is very thin, with the border is not so net, and it's broken sometimes. The last line is a mix between the two milks. So what we can see here, this is the difference between, here we have an average, not a big gap between morning and evening. And here we have a very, very big gap between morning and evening. So if we notice this, here we have, if we are doing 30% of carryover of the maize, the yield decrease between morning and evening. And this is the same if we field with full maize in the evening and no carryover in the morning. We have the same decrease. But what about of the cheese ability? The cheese ability show a great difference, because if we use 30% carryover to the morning, there is no difference of the cheese ability between morning, evening, and the mixed morning, evening. But if you don't carry over this meal from the morning to the evening, there is a big difference about cheese ability. So if you feed your animals twice a day, with one part of the meat changing morning and evening, cheese ability change more than yield. Bacteria cannot adapt their population, so they change the quality of the protein you can receive in the milk. And 30% carryover for us is the minimum to protect the bacterial balance and the cheese ability. Now we'll see what happens when you change the time of feeding. So what about 3 hours gap between day and night? If you feed the animals at 8 p.m. and 17 p.m. with 20 kilos of dry material, during the day, you feed the animals with 1.1 kilo per hour, but during the night, you feed the animals only with 0.75 kilo per hour. So we found in an experience that the 3 hour gaps in 2 meals is the limit, or 11 hours, 13 hours, cheese ability begin to change. But for 10 and 14, cheese ability and yield change deeply. So that's what we see now. Here we have a 3 hours gap. There is no difference about the defaults, the morphology. The yield is maintained, but the default decrease a lot between morning and evening, because the hadda has a high level of energy and constant energy during the day, and during the night there is a lack of energy, so the level of default or defect or we have difficult to make cheese with the milk in the morning. So now on a real farm, it was we made a study, we follow 40 farms last winter, so we have many results. On this farm, we have a rumen stability of -1. We are in purpose where the day is due 10 hours and the night 14 hours. So we are using beetroot and cereals, but beetroot in the evening are given a short time after the A. This is another problem. So look at the yield. In the milk of the morning, we reach 15% of yield, but in the evening, milk of the evening, we reach only 11. So there is a big gap between morning and evening if you have a gap of 4 hours between the day and night. The default or the morphology is higher in the morning than in the evening. So this is the same problem. When you are in the 10 or 40 years, we have problem to maintain the yield, the maximum yield, and to maintain the cheese ability. Now, we look to some criteria. So Edward told us about rumen stability, about fermentable energy, fermentable protein, and fine fibers. On the specific case, when fine fibers are over the fermentable energy, we are in a situation of overconsumption. So what about rumen stability and yield and defaults? When the rumen stability is very low, less than -4, we lose a lot of yield and we have a certain quantity of default. But if we increase the rumen stability, if the rumen stability get to over -1, the yield increase and the default maintain or increases very, very slow. So the microcheese default increase less than the rumen stability with the rumen stability. So if you want to make a cheese with high level of yield, you must absolutely maintain the rumen stability over -1 in your herd. For example, here we have a situation on the left, the rumen stability is -2.5, and one week after, the rumen stability is only -2, and look to the yield. We had 9% at the beginning, and we reached 30% after correcting the ration. On the non-coagulable protein, the low level here, on this part, the lower level decrease from 1.3 millimeters to 0.8 millimeters. So what about fermentable protein? When we need a lot of fermentable protein, where we have a lack of fermentable protein, here we have the level of fermentable protein of -3. So there is a big lack of fermentable protein for the rumen. We lose a lot of yield. And when we increase the fermentable protein, the yield increase, and this is very interesting because the default decrease. So the cheesability increase and the yield increase. So take care when we are severely lacking, when the soluble protein in the ration are severely lacking, you can really, really improve the situation with adding some fermentable protein. So an example, on the left, we had the level of fermentable protein -4, and look, two weeks after, we reach a level of fermentable protein of -1. The yield start at 10.4, and we reach 11.5, so 10% more in 1 week, and the default increase in this case. But look to the non-coagulable protein intermediate, they go from 1.5 to 1.1. So we have the main point is the rumen stability. The second point is the fermentable protein. And then we'll see the effect of the pH and the pH area in a situation on a farm. We increase the yield from 11.2 to 11.5. So the response with the yield is very low with the pH area, but we have we decrease the soluble protein in the whey from 1.2 to 0.8. But in this case, when the pH is active, we have a very, very high level of wastage of energy and overconsumption. So the pH is in link with economical result, but not in technical quality of milk. So when we are in a situation of overconsumption, when the fine fermentable fibers are more higher level than fermentable energy. This is the situation when the cows eat too much hay or too much grass. Look, the default in the blue line, the default increase, and the non-coagulable protein rate is constant. So it's more difficult to make cheese when the cows eat too much, but the yield doesn't change. So in this case, if we are in overconsumption, this is specifically the intermediate fractionate here on the gray line that decrease when the cows don't overconsumed, it not too much fermentable feed in comparison with energy. This is in the way we have the non-coagulable, non-retractable protein that go easily to the casein. That's why the level of protein will increase, and we saw the quality of cheese, the cheese ability increase. So we have here an example in a farm. 10 days after, the yield come from 11 to 12, and the level of protein rate go to 3.2 on 2.5 to 3.33. So we decrease, when we corrected this ration, we decrease the quantity of A, and the yield of the cheese increase. So the last symptom, this is the spinal chill. The spinal chill, this appears when cows compensate with their reserve a lack of energy. So the yield is maintained with no chill or with chill. On the left, this is no chill, no spinal chill. On the right, this is spinal chill. The red line say it's quite the same. Donc the yield, and the gray line is the yield. The red line is the default or the cheese ability, donc it's quite the same. But this is in the way, in the cooked way, that we saw difference. We can see differences. So when we see a spinal cheese on the cows, we lose a lot of soluble protein because the soluble protein increase. So we are losing cheese. Here, that's what we can see. In this case, with spinal cheese, we had a yield of 11. With no spinal cheese, 10 days after, we reach a yield of 12 points. Now, the cow pack cakes, we appreciate the quantity of fibers we have in the cow pads. So we have a specific material to measure the thickness of the cow pack cakes. And here, what we can see that when the cow pack cakes decrease, so we are improving the digestion of the fibers, the yield increase, and the default decrease. This is perfect. You make more cheese, and it's more easily to make cheese when the cow pack cakes decrease. In a farm, the cow pack cake at the beginning was 2.3 centimeters. 10 days after, 2.1, and the yield increase from 10 to 11.5, and the default of the cheese ability, the default is come from 9 to 5. With the same protein rate in the milk. Look, this is a very important point. The protein rate in the milk don't change, but the yield increase and the cheese ability increase. So we have in database a specific symptom, pH area, spinal cheese, thickness of the cow pack cakes, and overconsumption of forage. This is the main point you must take care to make good cheese in an easy way. So the milk is really variable. This is a hidden structure in liquid. This is revelated by digestion or cheesemaking, and in last point, contaminated by the environment. The adder works continuously, and there is no going back or waiting when appear a lack of energy. And what about passing of the terroir? The cheesemaker can pass the terroir only if the milk go well to make a cheese. So which milk you have, you must go to external side and observe the herd. In conclusion, the main question is quality soluble in chemical analysis? I don't think so. That's why we discovered the microcheese technique. Microcheese, milk quality changes, you can find out with why with Opsalim. This is a method very sensitive, and therefore it can explain the protein chain and the cheese itself. So we have now an interdependence between soil, plants, herd, and human society via the cheese. what we can see, there is a great variability in nature. Nature is changing, but the essence of the process are very stable when we understand them. And the knowledge to experience increase with maturity. That's the same thing with the cheese. So I will stop here. Thanks for your attention. And now we have time for any question.
Hello. All right, so we have several questions. Right off the bat, the cards that you were using were for cows. Are there also decks for goats and sheep?
No, we can do the same with goats and sheep, but the way is more opalescent, so it's more difficult to make photo. And in my area, we have many cows, so it's more easy to make research with cows than cheese and goat. But it works. It works.
What does
the cards? Yeah, sorry. The cards with the signs, they are different for sheep, goats, and cattle. So there's ones for sheep, there's ones for goats, and one for cattle. Yeah.
That was what I remembered, but I just wanted to clarify. Can you explain what cheeseability means?
Cheeseability. Cheeseability is a notice for us. Cheeseability is a notice of the default of the micro cheese. So it includes the deposit of the tube, so the non-retractable protein. That's what the cheesemaker see on the table. If you see filament at the table, this is what you see. This is so it's impossible to keep these filaments in the cheese. And then when you are cutting the cheese, we are in link with the curd, with the torsion of the break, or if the micro cheese is broken or not.
So really, these test tubes tests are showing us the ability for the cheese, for the milk to become good quality cheese.
To become cheese with no loss of protein, with no lack of protein, and a cheese with which you can do hard cheese or soft cheese. You can do any cheese you want with the maximal level of yield.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the cooking shows all the protein that actually haven't been caught by the curd, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So what's left after? What's left in the way? Is the Rumen schedule? I'm sorry, the Rumen cycle schedule you showed similar for goats?
Yes. Yes. The timeline is the same.
Based on the information of the natural rhythm of the rumen, when animals are not on pasture free choice grazing, but instead are getting hay and grain or other supplementary feed, would it be better to just make free choice hay available 24/7 and allow the animals to self-regulate? Or would it be better to mimic the rumen rhythm and feed at window intervals?
Shall I answer? That depends. If your animals behave really well and are clever and go and get some hay first before they have their concentrate, and they install their natural rhythm themselves because there's enough room, there's enough access to food and everything, then that's fine. But usually most of the time we are all a little bit overstocked, which means the animals are not sure they'll be able to access all the food in when they want. And then they will start to misbehave and probably start eating the concentrate first and then the hay afterwards, and then everything goes wrong. So the rhythms very quickly get disrupted. So it is more secure to make sure you provide a ration where they eat everything during every meal. That's the safest option, however you manage to achieve this. So in theory, yes. In practice, usually doesn't work.
So they're going to go and eat the dessert first.
Exactly.
Can you elaborate on global energy and its meaning?
But the global energy, that's the thing is, the Opsalim analysis, when you go to a herd, you find a few signs which are present on a lot of the animals. You pick out these cards, and then you make these totals, and these totals will tell you how the animals are experiencing what they eat and how they eat. And so the totals, if the global energy is the experience of the cattle, of the cow or the sheep or the goat, that there's not enough energy available for them. Okay, so what happens is the transformation of what the farmer gives to the animals to what actually enters into the animal is represented by this global energy criterion value.
Okay. What does correcting the ration mean at the farm level to increase yield and cheesability, as in slide 29?
Okay, correcting, but firstly, you have to know what goes wrong. And that's why you have to make this optimum assessment, and then you have your score, which will tell you actually the biggest problem is rumen instability, and you find out that the biggest problem is the rhythms are not respected, and that's usually the first thing you have to correct. So make sure they eat the same morning and evening at more or less 12 hours intervals, and once you got that regulated, then quite a lot of the problems actually go away, and that's a correction of the ration already. It's actually correction of when you feed them. And then if there's still a problem, then you might find actually the protein in my ration are not as soluble as I thought there was. I need more soluble protein because maybe the concentrates was pressed too hard and it doesn't get dissolved in the rumen. And that you find out once you regulated the rumen stability, the irregular eating. That's what the correction means.
Okay, thank you. Is there an English resource on explaining the Absalom method? Where do we get these cards info?
You can get the cards, but ideally you get some training because it's a bit like learning a language. There are people who pick up the cards, and there is a guide as well. That I showed a few pictures from the guide that explains it to you. So you could buy this from Bruno from his website, but it is like learning a language. If you get some training, it's always a good thing to do. And I don't know, Bruno, how far we are, but we have a plan of making this available on the internet at some point, some training with probably a seminar in the UK or in France. So there are ideas going on, but I don't know how far that is. Just that's Bruno decides that.
So we'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
It sounds like to get the free energy and the global energy, the feed was directly tested by tube testing. If so, is there a way to, well, actually, so is that what's happening? If that's the case, is there any way to evaluate these fermentable and global energy levels on farm, even if it might be more approximate or anecdotal?
Yeah, the thing, what's really important to understand is that when you do an upstream analysis, you get your score and your values for fermentable energy and global energy. That is the interpretation of the animals, of what you're giving them and how you're feeding them and their access. It's their interpretation. It doesn't tell you what's in your food. In your food, all the things might be in there, but they're either selective eating, they're not eating it at the right time, they're not ruminating enough, or maybe the food what's in your ration is not actually what you think it is. That happens as well.
Okay.
But the micro cheese is very interesting because the cheesemaker can ring the bell to the farmer. Hey, what did you do with the feeding of the animals? Because the micro cheese is changing.
Yeah, so if you do a test of if your milk comes if you receive your milk, you do your test overnight, you can see the next day something's going wrong. So you can tell the farmer before he knows that actually something's going wrong in his ration. So that is the link between, so the link goes both ways, from the rumen to the micro cheese, from the micro cheese to the rumen, the link goes both ways.
Okay. Can you clarify what you mean when you talk about carryover?
Carryover, this is to put. Tu peux expliquer, c'est du report.
Yes. The carryover means that it's the same type of feed was present in the morning, in the night. So the example he showed, he had 70% of the volume of one fodder available in the morning and only 30% at night, which means the composition of the meals weren't the same. Because in the morning there was more of this green maize than there was in the afternoon. And so the animals can cope with a limit of about 30% between the two. And once you go over that 30% difference between morning and afternoon, that was the 100% example, then everything falls flat, everything goes wrong. Because the bacteria, they need changing all the time and they can't cope anymore. Does that explain it?
We have about 3 minutes remaining.
And there's one more question in the Q&A, so we'll grab the, oops. Two more questions, sorry. First one is, how does the curd position relate to the cheese making ability? So the curd position in the micro cheese, whether it's high in the whey or low in the...
It depends of the density of the protein, donc the size of the casein, and it depends with it is linked with the presence of gas. Maybe some bacteria can produce gas, and then the micro cheese go to the top. But this is the density of the protein, so the quality of elaboration of the protein make that the curdle is going to the bottom. It's better if the curdle is in the bottom.
Okay.
At the bottom, there's more protein captured in the curd.
Okay. And then finally, what are sources of protein? Ration versus alfalfa versus hay versus free choice minerals?
We don't know actually. we are only observing the nature, not doing chemical analysis. We are observing micro cheese on animals, and that's all.
Yeah. So the Opsilim analysis is not an analysis what's in your food, it's an analysis how the animals perceive it, what's their experience.
I think the dog was...
Yes, I had to mute because there was a frenzy happening.
I was going to say, I think the dog agrees with that answer.
Yes. Okay, so that's it for the questions. I could spend an hour asking more questions, but alas, we're right up against the wall here for our time limit.
Thank you so much, Edward and Bruno, for this informative presentation. We are so appreciative. And thank you, Rachel, for fielding all those questions. That was fantastic. So we will take a short break. We will reconvene at 11:15 Eastern time for a conversation with distributors and buyers. So we will see you in 15 minutes, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.